They are not only just misinforming concerning American history, they are purposely and systematically deprogramming them as far as patriotism, as far as the family, all the things, the pillars that create a stable or maintain a stable society. American students are being taught against. And the blacks have, I guess, a jump on the white population, because in the black population it's been going on since the bastardized rights movement in the 1960s, and it has not been en masse in the white community until more recent years, maybe 20 years or so. So you've got a 30-year jump on the stupefaction of the black population, and so that's why you have a greater percentage of destroyers within the black community. But I will warn you that if this is not stopped very soon, within the next 5 years or sooner, you will have whites doing the same thing, because today whites are being deprogrammed, indoctrinated in the same manner. In fact, it's even more deadly in the way the whites are being just being indoctrinated today, more scientifically done than the blacks were done in the 70s and the 80s and all of that in the 90s. And so we've got to stop this.
Yeah, I've got to interrupt you here because we got to go to a break. But I was thinking the only time I could think of white people in mass rioting in my lifetime was the Weather Underground at the Democratic Convention, and there was a lot of violence that went on there, where all the white people under Bill Ayers decided, hey, we need to activate the blacks. And we'll do this by starting with the Democratic Convention. And there was a lot of violence there. We got to go to a break. Yeah. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Ron Edwards from the Edwards Notebook and Joe Hakos from Joy Report. But right now, it's time for Moments of Madness. Stay on Moments of Madness. With the recent signing into law of Indiana Senate Bill 101, legislatively known as the Senate Enrolled Act, National Journal writer Ronald Breinstein best summed up the left's latest desperate attempt to ensure Obama's third term by proxy in 2016. The objective behind his summation is the left's need to retain at least a pen and a phone in a White House that can continue to circumvent the separation of powers should they not recapture Congress through fundraising, vote pandering, redistricting, and fraud. Brownstein pens, with the Indiana Religious Freedom Law, Pence detonated what could be the biggest landmine facing his party in 2016, the sense that the GOP wants to reverse the cultural and demographic changes relentlessly remaking America. Brownstein reiterates, as only a media parrot can, that once again right-wing extremist factions, otherwise known as Christian conservatives, have succeeded in deviously enlisting yet another tepid establishment Republican in their quest to reinitiate the days of the Inquisition in order to thwart our first half-white president's bid to finish fundamentally transforming the United States of America. Using a 22-year-old federal law initially written by Democrat Senator Chuck Schumer and signed into law by Bill Clinton that was later diluted by the Supreme Court ruling in 1997 as an overreach into state sovereignty, several states have passed their own versions of the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act, which decrees people have a civil right to refuse to participate in activities that go against their own religious beliefs. Indiana has been the latest of 22 states to do this. Utilizing the race card as a premise from which the civil rights movement has been redefined to include anything anyone can dream up as a right, the left has introduced the war on women, which demands the right to murder unborn children and receive free birth control, all on the taxpayer dime, and the war on economic injustice, in which the wealth disparity theme has been embraced under Obama's creative destruction agenda, also known as wealth redistribution or Keynesian economics, and expanded and repackaged as new and improved by proclaiming opportunity and entitlement means the same thing. This has not been enough to once and for all bring about the left's vision of a utopian collective. The war on Christianity is the left's last leg of its progressive platform. It is a campaign designed to further redefine and rewrite American heritage and history by assigning Christian influence in government as the primary reason we are a nation of greedy, oppressing haters rather than generous, compassionate liberators. Forcing private sector enterprises to not only tolerate but condone and accept silently the immoral onslaught orchestrated by the left and subjected upon society by the homosexual activist community, we are now seeing the signs of political genocide equivalent to the early days of the Holocaust in Germany. Businesses are being marked for protests and boycotted, while their owners and CEOs are being tried and politically ostracized in the mock court of public opinion by ideological vigilantes. There is much more to the DNC's dislike of Israel than just its appeasement of Islam or its sympathy towards Palestine. Traditional Christianity stands in the way as to how a remade America should look, and it needs to be either redefined or removed. Barack Obama himself hides behind a newly fabricated shield of pseudo-Christianity, one that equates wealth redistribution and immoral tolerance as the essential elements of the gospel proclaimed by a black Jesus, while the rest of the world proclaims rainbows or validation that God is gay. Well, let us not forget another man who used this same facade as a means to an end. Hitler touted himself a Christian in the early days of his campaign. He, too, later perverted his doctrine to fit his ideological belief Jews were a problem that needed a final solution. Such it is today in regard to Christianity. Christianity remains the last barrier to tyrannical rule. It is the last reminder of moral conscience. It is the last voice that can warn of pending destruction and exile into the wilderness of enslavement. In the minds of the godless, Christianity must be eradicated in the same way Judaism was in Germany. Unfortunately, the church, for whatever reason, has spent too much time huddled within its own walls, believing if it just leaves the godless alone, they will leave it alone. Well, that isn't going to happen. It is time Christians acknowledge this. It is time to proclaim our own jihad, our own holy war in the name of Christian injustice. After all, if God is really for us, who can stand against us? What weapon formed against us can prosper? Of course, this means picking up the most effective weapon we have and wielding it. That weapon is our vote. It is time. What God has put together, let no man tear asunder. This is John Matthews for Moments of Madness. Okay, we're back right here on the Conservative Syndicate. I am your host, John Matthews. I have my co-host, Joe Hakos from Dry Report. Kind of quiet the last break there, my friend. And Ron Edwards from the Edwards Notebook doing his weekly contribution. I want to, if I can, kind of move on, Ron, to a different subject here. As we were at the break here, I was just, again, I'm just kind of surfing the net to try to keep up with some of the stuff that's going on. And an article just printed out here by Liz Goodwin, one of the Yahoos, reports that Justice Roberts today, during the hearing on the gay rights issue, asked a question that she, or maybe the media believes, may have tipped John Roberts' hand on how he is going to rule on the issue of homosexual marriage. And apparently, it goes like this. It's the general perception here of the homosexual agenda or movement is that homosexuals are being discriminated against because of their gender preference or their orientation, their sexual orientation. Roberts asked a question of one of the counsels today. He says, "Counsel, I'm not sure it's necessary to get into sexual orientation to resolve the case. I mean, if Sue loves Joe and Tom loves Joe, Sue can marry him and Tom can't. And the difference is based upon their different sex. Why isn't that a straightforward question of sexual discrimination?" So what Roberts is asking is the discrimination based on their gender rather than their sexual orientation, giving the indicator that he may believe that there is discrimination based on a person's gender rather than their sexual preference, which would tilt the court, obviously, in favor of the homosexual agenda. What's your take on that?
Oh, man. That's a little disturbing. Well, disappointing and disturbing, but not at the same time. I'm not surprised because Roberts has been has made it a practice to disappoint those of us on the right of things.
I can't help to think sometimes about Roberts that somebody dug some dirt up on him somewhere. This guy seemed to have done a 180 since once he sat on that bench and Obama came into power. His views have been so skewed and so off kilter. I can't help but think, he reminds me of that senator in The Godfather who asked Corleone to pay him off for the gaming license in Las Vegas, and so they set him up with a hooker. And all of a sudden he starts walking away from all these issues. Corleone's going to court, he's going to before the Senate committee, and this guy keeps recusing himself from hearing and everything else. And I just get that same gut check on me with Robert. Something happened to this guy. They dug up dirt on him or somebody in his family, and every time something like this comes up, he finds some way of weaseling out of it, of actually standing as a judge, and basically throws it up to some, off-the-wall type of interpretation of something.
Yeah, it's not good. I was looking at an article, an AP article here, where the justices were questioned a little bit. Attorney Mary Bonato, who argued for the gay couples seeking to marry or have their marriages recognized in states that do not allow the practice, which is Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee, said that those states' laws mean that a whole class of people are denied the equal right to be able to join in this very extensive government institution that provides protection for families. Well, first of all, marriage is not a government institution. I thought marriage was created by God, who created man and woman, and therefore that's where marriage comes from. It has a more firm foundation than even government. Justice Roberts said in this particular article, quote, "You say join in the institution of marriage. The argument on the other side is that they're seeking to redefine the institution. Every definition that I looked up prior to about a dozen years ago defined marriage as a unity between a man and a woman as husband and wife," Roberts said. Obviously, if you succeed, that core definition will no longer be operable. So he understands the correct definition of marriage, and for him to possibly go the other direction means that either he's been a closet liberal all these years and just waiting for his opportunity to help destroy things, or like you said, John, that maybe Obama or somebody has something on him. But something's up.
It's just I don't. We had on Chris Ann Hall last night, teaches the Constitution around the nation, and has her own radio show. Just dynamite, articulate woman on the Constitution. I mean, she answered our questions without hesitation and just nailed each point to the wall. And one of the things that she pointed out so well, I think what was the phrase she used, Joe? That the separation of powers has become topsy-turvy. We've got the court running the country, and Congress sitting on their butts, and then basically the executive branch just dictating by decree what they want the courts to do. And it certainly seems that's what we're faced with. She did point out, which I thought was really interesting, the idea, or something we need to be reminded of, in the original design of the separation of powers, the court was supposed to be the least powerful, and Congress was supposed to be the most powerful. And it's anything but that these days. Anything but that.
Yeah, that's true. And I remember, even in my lifetime, where there were instances where they thought that Congress was too powerful and the United States presidency was being diminished to such a level that it was of non-importance on the world stage. And now you've got to see, I think it was during the, let me see if my history lessons serve me here. I think it was during the Nixon years or something like that, or going into Carter. It just seemed that the American presidency was just a mess and a very unimportant entity, because I guess both of those guys had rather abysmal administrations, especially Mr. Carter, more so in my opinion than Mr. Nixon. But
I think in those days the argument that was being made about the president's authority being diminished was actually not really occurring. I think what was happening was Congress was beginning to see the beginning of the advancement of the president being able to use his office. I mean, we're talking about a man who thought Watergate was not illegal because it was for the good of the country. That was his justification. When the president does it, it's not illegal. I think Congress inherently was still solid enough in those days. I mean, we still had people like Barry Goldwater serving in the Senate. and saying, wait a minute, this guy is overreaching. And, of course, the media and Nixon's people trying to counter that with